Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Fall 2022 GSA Forum. My name is Keith Wallace, and I help lead the Outreach and Engagement section of BWR Sustainable Groundwater Management Office. Just want to thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this event. We're so excited to have you here, albeit virtually. But we've got a very packed agenda today, so which I'll start going over here in a couple of minutes, along with the meeting logistics. But I first want to turn it over to Paul Goslin, who's our Deputy Director of Statewide Groundwater Management, to say a few words. Paul?
All right, good morning, everybody. It's great to get together with you all, although virtually. Hopefully someday we'll get together, but I think these forums set up virtually really provide for a good turnout. Turnout today is real impressive. We have over 150 attendees, mostly from GSAs, and this is pretty exciting, critical juncture in SGMA, where right now all the high and medium priority basins have adopted plans. Some you've been at critically overdrafted for 2 years now, implementing them. So we're really shifting now to full implementation phase, and we want to make sure that implementation goes smoothly and keep control locally, which is at the core of SGMA. So this forms part of that. What we heard was, funding's been a major driver and concern in a lot of agencies. So, even though we've been lucky to be able to have state funds provided, last couple years, $300 million funds have been provided to date, and another 230 million by next year. But this is not going to last forever. We're going to be hopeful, and we're going to still strive to get state resources to assist implementation. But as budgets go, we know this is probably not going to continue for the foreseeable future. And so you're all going to need tools to help fund your agencies, programs, implementation. And so that's what we want this forum to be about. It'll be a nice forum to share ideas, platforms among your peers. We've assembled an outstanding panel of GSA representatives who've gone down the path of generating local revenue to talk about the steps they've taken and pitfalls and other things to keep in mind. And we'll also have breakout sessions to hear what's worked for you and what challenges and solutions you've encountered. And so we're hoping these critical discussions will help foster a good path forward for you all, and this forum will be successful. So really looking forward to the day, and hope you find this meaningful and successful, and really appreciate everything you do. So with that, I'll turn it back to Keith and get this program moving along. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So as he mentioned, DWR, we developed this forum as a platform for you, the local agencies implementing your GSPs and working towards sustainability. Wanted you to come together and be able to engage with one another. Some of you may remember that we hosted an in-person GSA forum back in March of 2019. We received a lot of positive feedback from that event, and we intended to actually host more forums in 2020. But then, COVID hit, and that sort of threw a wrench in our plans. But we think now is a good time to start these back up. And so we're planning on having 2 of these per year in the fall and spring timeframes. And moving forward, what we want these forums to be is a venue for discussing the GSP implementation topics that are pertinent to a broad group of GSAs. So, and while today's event is completely virtual, just to make it as easy as possible for all of you to participate, we do in the future plan to explore hybrid options just to see if that might work better for networking purposes. Next slide, please. So what are our objectives for today? What are we trying to accomplish for this and future GSA forums? We've already touched on this a bit, but to reiterate, the main purpose is to create a space for all of you to exchange ideas and interact. We want to be able to highlight the SGMA successes to see if they can be replicated in other parts of the state. But we also feel it's important to share the challenges and lessons learned in hopes of avoiding those elsewhere. But that stated, this is not a place where DWR or its panelists are providing specific directions or instructions to address your challenges. That's not possible, given that every basin has its own unique circumstances. For example, with today's event, while our panel members have a great deal of experience pursuing, funding options, they're not going to be providing legal or financial advice for you to follow. Instead, we're providing this as a venue to facilitate these discussions, so you can make connections with what's happening in other basins that may be applicable to your own, and to also foster professional network opportunities. And then lastly, we've set aside some time for you to provide input on potential state assistance efforts. And so we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to start off in a Zoom breakout session where we'll be splitting you all up into smaller groups to give you an opportunity to interact with some of the other participants. And then after a brief break, we're going to get into the main components of today's agenda, which is a panel presentation, and that's going to be followed by a question and answer session. And then we're going to have another breakout session after that to solicit some additional feedback about potential DWR assistance opportunities. And then we'll close things out. Next slide, please. So in terms of the logistics for today's forum, please keep your microphone muted and your camera off if you're not speaking. Try to ensure that your Zoom profile has your first and your last name in it. And then state your name before you're speaking. But if you encounter any technical difficulties as you're moving forward, please contact Christy Clark. She's our Zoom meeting host, and you can do that through direct message on this chat. And then finally, the theme for today's event, is funding SGMA implementation. And obviously, grant funding is a large component of implementation funding. But we want to focus today's discussion, like on things beyond or outside of the grant program. We already have a wealth of information associated with that grant program. And if you have questions, you can contact the grant program at this email address. That stated, we did want to highlight that the October 20th round 2 application workshop video and slides and frequently asked questions associated with that workshop are available on the Financial Assistance Branch grant program webpage. Well, I also wanted to mention that just yesterday, the application due date for round 2 was extended from November 30th to December 16th at 10 o'clock in the morning. Next slide, please. So we're going to start transitioning into our first breakout session here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it. What we're going to be doing is we'll be moving you in again to smaller breakout rooms to have like a facilitated discussion. We thought these smaller breakout rooms would be a little bit better than obviously try to have it in a large group like this, because we want to hear from all of you. And so in addition to you as the forum participants, each of the breakout rooms is going to include a DWR facilitator and a recorder. In this first breakout session that we're going to have is longer than the second. It's about 50 minutes. And then these discussions are going to be facilitated and guided around a few broad funding related topics. But this is also going to serve as our icebreaker, just to give you all a chance to get to know a little bit more about one another, and also to give you an opportunity to network. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned, a couple different times today, the theme of today is SGMA implementation funding. And we set it as that because we recognize this is really at the forefront of many of your challenges that you're trying to work through. And so we're going to focus the breakout sessions and the panel presentations today on funding, but really around 3 broad funding topics. And so that includes the GSA administration funding, which is really those costs that are required to operate the GSA on a day-to-day basis. Also, those things that are needed for coordinating with other GSAs or other pertinent entities within the basin. There's GSP implementation funding. These are costs that are go beyond the administrative aspects of SGMA. That includes like the planning, design and construction and operation of projects and management actions, and things like that. And then the third broad topic is outreach and engagement. So these are those costs that are needed to host public meetings, advisory committees, consensus building meetings, and then also developing educational materials that are related to support various funding mechanism, methodologies or other things associated with the engagement within your basin. So in this first breakout session, you're going to be discussing these broad topics in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So you are now going to get moved into your breakout rooms, and we're going to meet back here into the main room for the panel discussion at 10:05. So hope you all have a very in-depth conversation. Please don't be shy. Obviously we have everybody here that are participating in Sigma in some capacity and have a lot of lessons to share. I'm sure. So please enjoy that, and we'll see you back here at 10:05. I just want to say welcome back from the breakout sessions and that a very brief break. Hope you're all able to stretch your legs and get something to drink. Hope you found those conversations really engaging and beneficial. But we're going to move into our panel presentation portion of the forum. And as we've talked about at the beginning of this, that these presentations are going to focus on how these GSAs have approached funding Sigma implementation. And so we've assembled a really diverse group of GSAs, for this panel to showcase how the various geographic locations, governance structures, and funding approaches, have taken place, throughout the state. So for today, that each panelist is going to provide a brief, about 10-minute presentation about what they have done within their basin or basins. And then what we'll do is we'll have that followed up with a question and answer session where you as the meeting participants are going to be given an opportunity to ask some questions of our panelists. Next slide, please. And so here are our panelists in order of appearance for today. They include Maria Delajanis, who's the Deputy Director the Deputy Water Resources Director of Lake County Water Resources Department. Carrie Schmitz, the Water Supply Division Chief for the Sacramento County Water Agency. Sierra Ryan, the Water Resources Manager of the Environmental Health at the County of Santa Cruz Health Services Agency. Aaron Fukuda, who's the General Manager of Tulare Irrigation District. And Kim Lowe, the Groundwater Manager of Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. So I just want to thank everybody for participating. And we'll go ahead and get us started off with Marina. Go for it, Marina.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can everyone hear and see me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. I am going to go ahead and perfect. You have my slides already ready. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to see a lot of familiar faces. Again, unfortunate that we are meeting via Zoom, but it's the new normal, right? So again, my name is Marina Delajanis. I serve as the Deputy Water Resources Director for the Lake County Watershed Protection District in beautiful Lake County, California. I also serve as the lead for our Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. And then in my free time, I serve as a board of director for the California Groundwater Resource Association. So groundwater is my forte. Next slide, please. I'm really excited to be chatting with you all today. I'm definitely excited to be on the panel with a few of my colleagues. But what I'm going to be chatting with you guys today a little bit is, well, first I'm going to start out and just do an overview of our Big Valley Groundwater Basin, kind of lay out the stage of where we're at, to give you all an understanding of where we've been and where we're planning on going in the future. I'm going to highlight 3 different key components to this presentation in terms of our GSP planning and moving into the implementation of our groundwater sustainability plan. The first key component is how we've been able to utilize outreach and engagement for GSP planning and implementation. The second aspect of this presentation will be leveraging state-provided resources for GSP. I call this our training wheels here in Lake County. So how do we go from state to then local local assistance. And that'll be my final key takeaway, is that transition in itself from relying very heavily on the support and guidance from the state. But now that we are getting our understanding of compliance with SGMA, how we're making that transition. And of course, everyone's favorite, I'm going to highlight some of our key takeaways, achievements made, and next steps. Next slide, please. All right, so Big Valley Groundwater Basin 5-015, apologies for that mix up right there. There is another Big Valley Basin, but we are located in beautiful Lake County, California. We are a rural, underrepresented community. The entire county is identified as a disadvantaged community, outlined by the state and other DAC tools. Our Big Valley Groundwater Basin is a medium priority basin, as outlined by DWR's Bulletin 118. And we lie south of Clear Lake. As you can see here, Clear Lake, if you did not know, fun fact, is California's largest natural lake. That is my favorite sentence ever. If you know me, you've probably heard me say that at least 500 times. And we also have in our basin Adobe Creek and Kelsey Creek, two larger tributaries that enter into our beautiful lake, Clear Lake. And then both of these tributaries are also key habitat for the Clear Lake hitch, which is a listed species, and I'll chat about the Clear Lake hitch and the impact of our SGMA compliance. Our Big Valley Basin is the source of water for the communities of Kelseyville and Big Valley Rancheria, and it is the largest agricultural area in our Lake County. So the majority of our economy's sustainability comes from the health of Clear Lake. We are voted the #1 bass fishing lake. We have a lot of recreational opportunities here in Lake County. And then also we are in the Napa Valley wine growing region. So Napa actually sources a lot of their wine from our Big Valley region specifically, and Lake County in general. We also grow in our Big Valley Basin walnuts, and then marijuana is now a huge booming industry that we have in the community. And I'll highlight that a little bit further into the presentation. The basin itself is 6 miles wide and 8 miles long. Next slide, please. Here, I want to take the opportunity just to go over our short timeline. As you can see, it is short, but this is just to give you guys an idea that we have not been working on SGMA here per se for a very long time in our Big Valley Basin. We are a very strapped department. Not only do we do SGMA compliance with our 1 priority basin, but we are also tasked again with the protection and preservation of California's largest natural lake. We're a small community. We are not a part of the general fund. We do flood fight. We are tasked with the NFIP program. We do sound bacteria, quagga zebra mussel prevention, just to list a few of the many things that we do. So in terms of SGMA, we were very late to the game, and we acknowledge that. Now, disclaimer and fun fact, we did submit our GSP by the deadline, which is very, very exciting. And I think we surprised a lot of people. I don't want to say necessarily including myself, but definitely want to thank the team that helped us do that. Okay. So just to highlight some of the key timeline aspects, we did form our Big Valley GSA in 2019. We were awarded the facilitation support services from DWR in 2019 and 20, and we are still in the process of utilizing those facilitation support services. In January of 2021, we released the request for quotes and proposals for our Big Valley GSP development assistance. And we were able to select and identify our consultants, Ludorf and Scalmanini and Santec Consulting Services, who were awarded that Big Valley GSP proposal to help us develop our GSP. We were then able to adopt our Big Valley GSP in January 2022, and we were able to submit it to the state unanimously with GSA approval. Next slide, please. All right, so here is one of my favorite topics to talk about is our GSP outreach and engagement. If it wasn't for the outreach and engagement that we were able to lean on for the development of our GSP and now transitioning to the implementation, I am confident that we would not be where we were at. And in terms of support, momentum, et cetera, for our compliance with SGMA and our Big Valley GSP basin. So with our community, there are a lot of legacy farmers and legacy community members as well. We are very lucky that a lot of our stakeholders in the basin have been able to utilize the land, farm the land, immerse themselves in the land of our Big Valley Basin and just Lake County community in general for generations. With that, there's pros and cons, right? And I will highlight some of those pros and cons. So one group that we specifically been able to work with and lean on is our Big Valley Rancheria, the tribal community. So working very closely with them of the work that they've been able to do, their knowledge of the land, and do more of a co-management with that group and those stakeholders who know the land best. We also have a lot of farmers, thanks to the representatives on our advisory committee. I'm going to refer to them as our GSPAC. We love acronyms in the water world, as we are all well aware. We've been able to start building that trust and that relationship with our farmers and the users in that basin. Just in general, being able to leverage our local voices, that has been one of our biggest key aspects and successes that we've been able to use. We have a lot of folks in the community that rely very heavily on Facebook and social media for their source of knowledge and information. Again, pros and cons to that, right? So looking at some of our key leaders that are active on Facebook and that have radio shows, that's another big thing that we have in the community. And then also articles in the newspapers or just blogs in general. So leaning on some of those key personnel to get the information out there about what we are doing in our Big Valley Basin, next steps, etc. And with that, we've been able to debunk a lot of the myths, a lot of the uncertainty, and start building some of that trust with our stakeholders. And that, again, that's the whole reason why we're doing this, right? We want to ensure sustainability so we are able to utilize our groundwater basin in a sustainable manner for all uses and users. Some of the obstacles encountered, again, with that is there's a lot of community lacking trust in not only our county, but also our state government as well. There's a lot of folks that when they see the county car roll up to do groundwater monitoring, they close the blinds. Think of your very stereotypical rural Northern California community, and I'm confident that Lake County has encountered some of that stereotypicalness. And then again, just the legacy farmers being able to lean on our advocates and our advisory committee, and just in general, there are some folks that have been confident that our basin is sustainable. There's no issues. They've been farming on this land for generations, but trying to get them to see the big picture. That has been some of the obstacles, but also achievements. And again, one of our biggest achievements is just strengthening that relationship with stakeholders, especially our domestic well owners and our tribal community that we have in this basin. Next slide, please. All right, so our training wheels, as I like to call it, we have been very fortunate and very appreciative of the support and guidance that the state has been able to provide us. Not only that technical aspect, we are a relatively young department. The person that has been here the longest has only been 5 years, but in terms of SGMA compliance, we don't have a whole lot of expertise in terms of groundwater modeling, et cetera. So being able to lean on our friends at the state have been very beneficial. Some of the key aspects that we've been able to receive from the state, if it wasn't for these resources, we would still be way back in 2019. And I don't think we would have been able to submit our GSP on time. So we leaned heavily on our Prop 68 SGM grant. We are in the process of doing the application for the implementation grant. With that round 3 of SGM planning grant, we received a little under 1.4 million with $0 cost share, since we are an underrepresented community, and we used all those funds to onboard our consultant to get that expertise and develop our GSP in a timely manner. We also have, again, just the guidance from the State Water Resources Control Board as well. When we talk about the state, of course, we have to understand there are multiple state entities as well. And then our facilitation support services have been huge in ensuring that we reach all uses and users and have been able to bring them to the table to make sure their voices are heard. We still are in the process of onboarding a few voices, and we've identified that. So being able to lean heavily on our facilitation support services has been key in getting us to where we are and building that trust in that relationship. Again, and we are also working with the state to do technical support services as well. So we like to see any opportunity we can and run with it. That's something that is very common for Lake County in terms of identifying resources that we are able to pull from, especially facilitation support services and technical support services. Again, we are not a part of the general fund, so utilizing these grants, it can be very difficult for us. And I'm sure other folks are well aware that when you have overlapping grants and reimbursement, that can get kind of tricky. So the TSS and the FSS services have been very beneficial for us. Next slide, please. All right, our favorite topic, locally managed and locally funded. That has been one of the biggest points that I've been trying to get across to our board of supervisors who act as our Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We are in the early planning of our process of that local funding. I'm going to highlight a few things that we've been able to utilize here. I call them our low-hanging fruits, but one of our biggest tasks that we will be tackling soon is our Prop 218. Again, it goes back to the point that I brought up, that there's a lot of mistrust in the government. We've tried to do this for other zones of benefit. For example, we have flood zones that we oversee. A lot of these props and assessments do not pass in the county. Again, we are a very poor county. A lot of folks don't have a lot of money. We have a lot of retired folks that are already on a strapped income. So trying to do that outreach and engagement with them, get them that information, bringing the information to them and not just having public meetings, because we find that that doesn't always work. We have been developing our GSP and now in implementation all during the COVID pandemic. Not everyone in the county has access to reliable internet. Not everyone has the ability to come in person to the courthouse or a different area. So trying to have the information brought to them and engage with them and find avenues that they can get the reliable information and that support and guidance. So that's going to be one of our biggest hurdles and something that we are actively working towards. Another source of local funds that we've been able to lightly grab from, and that I'm hoping that we will continue to grab from. As I said, cannabis is a booming industry in Lake County. We do have a cannabis permitting process. And with that cannabis permitting process, the county has identified specific priorities for those funds to be moved towards. One being environmental conservation and protection. So being able to use pull from some of those funds to help us do some more boots on the ground and low-hanging fruit funding. Again, understanding that that is still up in the air. We're still trying to figure out the cannabis permitting process. We kind of put the wagon before the horse, or however that saying goes with that, but we're slowly figuring it out. And that's something that we have pulled from and are planning on pulling from. Now, in terms of obstacles, as I've highlighted, we are a disadvantaged community and basin. The entire basin is a disadvantaged community. So again, we are pulling from very little resources already and support and funding that we can grab from. There's still a lot of misunderstanding of SGMA from the community. A lot of folks aren't well aware of SGMA or still don't have the strongest idea of SGMA compliance and what we're planning on doing. So that's still a moving effort. And then again, just mistrust of local government. I see Amelia popping up, so I'm going to hit my in conclusion slide. Next slide, please. All right, so I've highlighted some of these. Our key takeaways: stakeholder engagement is key. In terms of sustainability, it's going to be reliant on the relationship that we've been able to build and continue to build. That is a key aspect with our stakeholders. We're going to need their support. We're going to need their trust. And especially when we have that strong mistrust, that is something that we can not only continue to communicate, but we need to demonstrate that we are working towards the greater good, that we are all on the same team. And leaning on the tools in our toolbox, I had the slide where it showed some of our advisory committee members, and being able to lean on their expertise, their tools, their knowledge has been key in terms of the successful compliance with SGMA and the implementation that we're moving towards. Achievements, again, GSP completion and submittal, very exciting. Continue to build trust in our community. And with that, we've been able to see that the SGMA compliance that we've been able to do in our Big Valley groundwater basin has really set the framework for other sustainable groundwater management throughout the counties as well. So we've been able to get a lot of exciting projects going throughout the county. My biggest goal with my role is I want to build a cohesive groundwater monitoring network throughout all of the counties, because throughout the entire county, we have 12 different groundwater basins, but only one priority basin. But I would like to make that more cohesive and understanding for the community and ourselves. You can see some of our next steps. I'll just highlight a few. Again, Prop 218 is one of our biggest priorities. Continue to do engagement with our underrepresented users. We are still missing advocates on our GSPAC for underrepresented users, although our entire county is a disadvantaged community and underrepresented community users. We do not have any active groups that are working towards that. So trying to find that key voice has been very difficult for our advisory committee and us to identify, but we are slowly getting there. And then again, just stronger engagement and continued engagement with our tribal community and our domestic well owners. Still planning on leaning on our facilitation support services. And of course, like the majority of the folks on this call, planning on submitting an application for the SGM implementation grant. With that, I would just like to acknowledge all of you. Thank you for being here, leaning on your expertise, our Big Valley GSA Advisory Committee, of course, the state and our consultants. And with that, there is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to discuss with any of you, and of course, be soundboards for one another. So with that, I think I can take questions, but I'll be looking at my friends at DWR to give me the thumbs up or thumbs down on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. No, actually, we're going to do questions at the end. So I think Carrie is up next. Yep.
Well, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you just fine.
Fantastic. I'm Carrie Schmitz. I'm with Sacramento County Department of Water Resources. I have more years of experience in groundwater than I want to admit to, but I've been working with Sacramento County since SGMA passed in 2014, and we started implementing in 2015. So I've been very involved in SGMA since then. Next slide, please. So my presentation today is going to be focused on a specific fee program that I worked through in one of the subbasins in Sacramento County. But these first couple slides provide more of an overview of groundwater management in Sacramento. So in Sacramento County, we have 4 different subbasins. We have the North American, South American, Cosumnes, and Solano. Each of the basins has its own personality and certainly is kind of in varying levels of maturity as far as groundwater management. Sacramento County Board of Supervisors directed staff a few years ago to accept management responsibility for any unmanaged areas. So you can see that there are some blue areas on the slides. Those are the Sacramento County GSA areas. We have a very small piece of the South American subbasin. We have a larger piece in the Cosumnes subbasin, and then an even larger piece in the Solano. Today, I'm going to be focusing on a fee program that we worked on in the Cosumnes subbasin. Next slide, please. So this is the Cosumnes subbasin. There are 7 GSAs in the subbasin. There are 6 in the county portion of the subbasin. There's 1 in the Amador, kind of that big green area is Amador County. The GSAs in this subbasin have worked very well together during development of the GSP and implementation. They've agreed to work together to implement the GSP. So they decided on a phased collaborative approach to developing a fee program in the basin. The basin is mostly agricultural. There's only a small urban area, the city of Galt, which is in purple on the map. There's about 123,000 acre foot of water used annually, and this excludes the Amador piece and city of Galt. And I exclude them simply because they were treated a little bit differently in the fee program. And we know that there are about 49,000 irrigated acres in the basin. Next slide. So we started the process for developing the fee program, pulling together all of the information we knew about the basin. You know, how many parcels, what types of land use, you know, what's our pumping in the basin. A lot of that information, we pulled it together to try to understand the best way to pursue a fee program. We also developed a detailed cost estimate for implementation, and this fee program is very specific to implementation of the GSP. We were fortunate in Sacramento County to have a fee program, an existing fee program that could fund some of the costs of developing the GSPs that supplemented the DWR grant money that we were able to get. So we looked at a detailed cost estimate. We also developed in the Cosumnes Basin, we developed a governance committee, a long-term governance that really dove deep into different fee approaches, what made sense for the basin. And we really wanted to find something that was certainly legal, but fair, equitable, and the other kind of standard that we held ourselves to was reasonable. What is reasonable for the residents in this basin? And so, we really tried to factor that in. In the Cosumnes Basin, we decided on a phased approach, understanding through the work that we did in our GSP that we have an issue. We're pumping, 10,000 acre feet more than is sustainable. So not only do we have to implement the program, but we have to come up with solutions. How do we solve our sustainability problem? So we decided on a phased approach for the fee program, and decided that the first phase we would focus on just administration and implementation costs, and then in the phase 2 fee program, look at program and project costs. So that's the way the basin collectively decided to move forward. We hired consultants, we worked with attorneys to develop a fee program that the methodology would be consistently applied across the Cosumnes Basin, yet would be implemented by each of the GSAs in the subbasin. Hearing a little bit of noise, I'm not sure what that is. And we did public outreach. You've heard a lot about public outreach. Marina talked, a lot about it, which is great, and I appreciated her thoughts. We did public outreach throughout the process. We provided updates. The committee provided updates at the working group, which was the larger decision-making entity for the Cosumnes Subbasin. So we felt like, we were transparent through the process. And then we did very specific targeted outreach in the basin as well. Next slide, please. So the first year fee program, we kind of looked at a lot of options, but we eventually decided on a cost per irrigated acre. It also calculates cost per acre foot of water used, and that's for Galt and Amador, who had a better sense of how much groundwater they were pumping. We used irrigated acreage as a proxy for groundwater use in our basin, just based on kind of our lack of understanding of how much water was being pumped per parcel. Irrigated acreage is kind of the best proxy that we could find. Again, it's a consistent methodology for the entire basin except for Galt and Amador, and they pay based on groundwater used. We did include an administrative appeal process, which I think is really important. It provides those impacted by the fee the opportunity to, let us know if we've got something wrong. And again, this first phase, kind of the first phase program funds monitoring, data management, auditing, so it really covers sort of the administration and operations costs to get the management program going in this basin. And the phase 2 program will cover, or the phase 2 fee will cover programs and projects. Next slide, please. So this slide just kind of drills down to the county GSA area and kind of shows the irrigated acreage, kind of the parcels that were assessed the fee. We use data from the 2018 statewide crop mapping from DWR. I don't think this is a perfect data set, but I think it was a good data set to get us started. I know that we are contemplating other data sets, but right now, this is how our fee program started. And again, we focused on irrigated agriculture, and the county GSA, which again is a very small GSA in the basin. We have 105 parcels and approximately 7,200 irrigated acres. Next slide, please. So the calculation of our fee is really simple. Simple is good. So we looked at the total costs to implement the GSP, and we divided it by irrigated acres. I think keeping it simple was a good thing for us, not only to sell to the various GSA governing entities, including the Board of Supervisors, which is my GSA governing entity, but to explain it to folks and landing on a nice round number, $10 per irrigated acre, seemed to meet the reasonableness threshold in our basin, which again, our basin is largely, agricultural. We have some ag-res, very small area of urban, and we have a lot of rangeland, not irrigated rangeland in the basin. Next slide. So this is kind of my lessons learned summary slide. And I know others have said this, and, I'll just repeat it. You can't do enough public outreach. There's just no way to get to everybody in the basin. People are busy and they don't have time to go to a lot of public events. You do the best you can, but it never seems to be enough. So certainly a lessons learned is maybe do more. I think a coordinated approach in the Cosumnes Basin, we have multiple GSAs in the basin working independently, but working together to develop a consistent methodology for the whole basin, I think was a really good way to go in this basin. Again, each GSA governing body adopted the feed program, and each GSA implements the feed program, but it's a consistent methodology. So folks in the basin, are getting assessed the fee, consistently. Simple is better to approve and administer. I think, our program is very simple, and especially right off the bat, if you're not a very mature basin that hasn't been, actively managed for many years, I think a simple fee program is better to, explain to folks that are going to be impacted by it. One thing that, so we adopted the fee program a couple of years ago. We've implemented it 2 years now. And one thing that I think I learned in the first 2 years is each GSA really needs to consider GSA specific administrative costs and build those into the fee program. I don't think that I had an understanding of how significant those administrative costs were. For example, in our little GSA, which we only collect $70,000 roughly, in our GSA, the auditing costs, just the auditing costs are, in the $8,000 range. So tacking on, those costs in addition to staff time and, assessor's office and everything else, it gets kind of expensive. So anyway, I think that's a really, if I had to make a point, I would say that's an important one for folks to consider as they're developing a fee program. It takes a lot of time to work through the alternatives and understand what really will work for your GSA. And I think for us, when we were working through this, we were, kind of getting to the end of developing our GSP, but so we had the knowledge that we needed to put together costs and move forward with the fee program, but you have to get it in place in time to implement. So there's sort of a window that we were working within. So it was kind of constrained, and it was a busy time, but I think it's really important to go through the exercise of what works for your basin. And last thing for us, using irrigated acreage as a proxy, I think we go through the process of reaching out to those impacted by the feed program every year and saying, hey, here's, how much irrigated acreage we have in our database for you. Is this correct? And so provides people the opportunity to get back to us and let us know if, something has changed, and that way we get to update our database. I think that's an important step, not only because it helps us have a better database, but it also continues the outreach and education for folks and reminds people that this fee program is out there and is going to be included on their tax bill. So think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time, but my email address is on the screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I think, again, we'll hold questions till the end. So Sierra, you're up.
All right, thank you. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Sierra Ryan. I am the Water Resources Program Manager for the County of Santa Cruz. I'm in the Environmental Health Department. I'm here to talk a little bit about two things today. The first will be the challenges that we've been facing with how to finance some of our groundwater sustainability agencies in the county. And then the second will be some creative thinking that we've done about ways to improve cost efficiencies for implementation and compliance with SGMA that I think might have some valuable lessons learned or could serve as a model for other parts of the county, other parts of the state. I should say that I've been involved with SGMA since 2016. That's when we started in the Mid-County Groundwater Basin, which I'll be showing in a minute. So here we are. This is where Santa Cruz County is located. It's on the central coast, also on the Monterey Bay. So we have a lot of coastline there. We also have a lot of important riverine systems that support anadromous species of fish. So we care a lot about the environment here. We care a lot about agriculture in this area. So there's a lot of factors facing us here, despite the fact that we're a pretty small area. Next slide. So we have three groundwater basins that met the criteria for SGMA compliance within the county. The Santa Margarita, the Santa Cruz Mid-County, and the Pajaro Valley. Both Santa Cruz Mid-County and Pajaro Valley are high priority basins in critical overdraft as identified by DWR. Their biggest challenges that put them in that critical situation is the risk of seawater intrusion into the basins. Santa Margarita is a medium priority basin. I should mention that all of their GSPs or alternative in Pajaro Valley's case were submitted on time, and Santa Cruz Mid-County's was approved, and Pajaro Valley's alternative was also approved. Next slide. So given that the focus of this presentation is funding, I'm going to talk mostly about the Santa Margarita and the Santa Cruz Mid-County, which are funded right now through member and partner agency funding. We don't have yet a way to, a mechanism yet to receive funding from outside users, although that's largely what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm sorry, you can't really see there on the slide. It looks like it might have been cut off, but Pajaro Valley has been around a lot longer, and they have more established funding mechanisms that are able to focus on the users of the groundwater basin. And I should also say before we move on that when I was first asked to speak, the topic was solutions for funding these GSAs, and I was like, well, I don't really know what you expect me to say because I have a lot more questions than I do answers right now, but it sounds like I'm not the only one, so maybe what I say will resonate with some of the other people on this call today. Next slide. So this is how the breakdown of how we've been financing these GSAs go, and this is part art, part science, I would say. The member and partner agency distributions of the funds are based on a number of factors, including the total amount of groundwater pumped from the basins, other factors such as impact of the pumping on the basin, especially the priority sustainability management criteria, seawater intrusion and interconnected surface water being the biggest concerns in this area. And part of it is based on ability to pay. There's varying sizes of these agencies and budgets are different. There were also impacts from recent fire activity that has strapped the budgets of some of the agencies. So there's some amount of negotiation that went into these budgets. But as you can see, they are distributed amongst the agencies, but you don't see any of the agricultural users, you don't see any of the private wells paying in, and really at this point the county is sort of representing those users in terms of the budget, and that is part of the challenges that we're facing. Next slide. I would say that really the biggest challenge that we see in terms of coming up with funding mechanisms for these basins is the fact that we are predominantly, the land use is predominantly urban and rural domestic. So we have a lot of rural residential properties that are either, some of them are on water systems, large and small, and then some are more municipal, larger water systems that are providing that water, but the water is still being used for primarily domestic purposes. In both basins, it's up around 90% of the water use. There's some wiggle in that because there are things like schools that are also inclusive of these. But really, the point I'm trying to get across with this slide is that we don't have a lot of large pumpers that are not serving smaller uses. So we have no agriculture in the Santa Margarita Basin, and we have agriculture only is about 4% of our water use in the Santa Cruz Mid-County. And then we have some other non-de minimis users, which are things like homeowners associations that have ponds and some institutional pumping and camps and things like that. But really the predominant water use is just people at their houses, maybe with small gardens for personal use, but we're not talking about large commercial ventures here. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about what are the costs. You know, I talked earlier about who's paying them, but what are these costs? And I'm focusing, I should say that the agencies have both, Santa Cruz Mid-County and Santa Margarita have both established that the groundwater sustainability agencies are going to cover the cost of SGMA compliance, but that the implementation of projects and management actions to bring the basin to sustainability is going to be mostly covered by the member and partner agencies that are implementing these projects, because any project that's bringing the basin to sustainability is also a water supply project for these agencies. At least that's been the thinking. So let's talk about what these compliance costs include. I'm talking about things that we're doing just in terms of meeting SGMA requirements. So the annual reports and the 5-year updates are part of these costs. All of the additional monitoring, of course, we were already monitoring groundwater elevations in the basins, but we've expanded that monitoring network. We've included more stream gauges, and all of those costs are included in these numbers you'll see. We have a data management system as a requirement of SGMA, and there are, even though we had grant funding to build the data management system, there are hosting and maintenance costs that are going to be ongoing forever. There's also, Carrie brought this up as well in her presentation, but there are a lot of administrative costs associated with being a public agency, audits, legal agreements, just paperwork, hosting these Brown Act compliant meetings, getting your board packets assembled and put together and released on time, and a whole host of what feel like small but add up to be some pretty large requirements. And all of this is being borne by a really small amount of pumping. So if you look at the amount of acre feet pumped annually in these two basins, we're talking under 3,000 acre feet a year total in the Santa Margarita Basin. That's all the pumping that's happening. And then Santa Cruz Mid-County, it's under 5,500 acre feet. These numbers are, margins of error in many of, or even less in many of the basins throughout the county. And so, throughout the state, which adds to a lot of challenges because our annual basic compliance costs for those items bulleted above are pretty high. We're talking not quite $500,000, but $400,000, $450,000 for just complying with SGMA without actually solving the problem or delivering water to anybody. And if you look at these costs per acre foot for just the administration, or just the compliance, those are pretty high numbers. Those are high numbers in some basins where they're actually doing and implementing projects with that. And we're just talking about SGMA compliance, which makes it really hard to put together a compelling argument for why people will want to pay this, because we're basically saying, it costs about $150 an acre foot just to host meetings and do monitoring and things. It's not a narrative that gets a lot of people excited. Next slide. So we are looking into what various options are for long-term funding. And, one of those options is to continue the system that we're using now, where it's member agency and partner agency funded. But there are a lot of questions about whether this is really equitable in the long run. The county doesn't receive money from private well owners to pay for their contribution to the impacts of pumping on the basins. Some of the situations end up with like one neighbor's, where you have agencies that essentially there's a boundary, and on one side of the boundary you have a household that's using 4 units of water a month, and they're paying 10% of the share of the basin, whereas across the street you're paying 70, but using the same amount of water in the same basin. There's also questions about some folks are paying essentially twice. If you're in the unincorporated county and you're on a water agency, which is actually most of the people in these basins, you're paying both through your property tax and you're paying through your water rates. So you're essentially paying twice. So that might be the best mechanism and the most defensible, but it's something that we do need to study. Other options, pumping fees are really difficult to implement when it's domestic users. And then parcel taxes, many people have talked about how they are expensive and time consuming to implement. You need some level of public approval, but also the cost that we could charge, that we could charge would be hard to recoup even the cost of doing that work when you have so few users. So these are all the challenges that we've been facing, along with ongoing increasing requirements and trying to actually implement our GSP. So now I want to switch to a more positive view. I feel like this got a little negative, and talk about what are the opportunities that we can try to build these economies of scale. So my high school economics teacher must be thrilled right now because I use this phrase all the time. Economies of scale is essentially the principle that you get more cost advantages by distributing fixed costs amongst a larger group of users. So the cost per user goes down when you add more users to pay for things. As you already saw on the map, I'm not going to go back to it, but we have contiguous boundaries between the Santa Margarita and the Santa Cruz Mid-County Groundwater Basin. So they're already connected. They're both within the same county. And if you see on this slide here, there's actually a lot of the same partners and members involved. So the County of Santa Cruz is a member agency of the Joint Powers Authority that forms both of those groundwater agencies. The City of Santa Cruz Water Department is also involved in both agencies as a member in one and as a partner in the other. We're using the same consultants in both basins, both independently selected, but they ended up being the same users. So you start to see a lot of overlap. So you have a contiguous basin and you have many of the same players. So you start to think, well, maybe there's opportunities here. So next slide, please. So we started to think about how can we act as if are there opportunities to act as if we're a bigger basin when it comes to some of the requirements for both of them? And there were two areas that really stood out as opportunities to try to build economies of scale and partnerships between the two agencies. So I'm going to talk about them both and then I'll explain this slide afterwards. So the first was our data management system. Given that we have agencies contributing data to both of the GSAs, it really made a lot of sense for us to consider building a joint data management system. We have a contiguous boundary as well, which from a scientific perspective, it also helps if you are gathering data and entering it and tracking it in the same place. It also means that you can export data that crosses that boundary to see if there's any, to easily identify overlaps and challenges and look for consistencies. We ended up we did just that. We jointly developed a RFP members of both of the GSAs worked on developing the RFP and the scope of work, and on the selection committee that interviewed candidates. And ultimately, we are really happy with the product that we got. I have another presentation with a bunch of slides on that, but I can send the link to our data viewer right now. It's still we're still finishing up the final touches, but it's been wonderful. And having that, having all of the data in one place from a data perspective is really advantageous. The second thing that we were really struggling with was staffing these agencies. So they're member agency funded. They're also jointly staffed by member agencies. Neither of these agencies have their own staff person. So all of the activities are led by staff from the member and partner agencies and consultants that we've hired. And that's been the burden of that has really been weighing on us. So we also realized, though, that neither of these agencies have the funding for a full-time, groundwater manager, or even the need for that sort of full-time position. We felt like both agencies have about a half-time job to do the oversight and planning of the agencies, and then additionally support for administrative services. And so we got together, and I'm not going to say this was easy, or that it was quick, but staff got together first and said, I think that we could probably, if we pool our resources, hire one full-time person who could work 50% for each agency. And the advantage of that is that if you're trying to hire a half-time person, you're looking for a really, a high-quality candidate who can afford to live in Santa Cruz County. And that's really hard to do. If it's hard to attract someone and keep them if you're only offering them half-time work. So we thought that we'd be able to have a more lucrative position if we were offering full-time work. And it's, certainly interesting working with both agencies. And then for the administrative services, talk about economies of scale. The administration is very similar in terms of all of the SGMA compliance work. So it makes a lot more sense, rather than each agency hiring one administrator, to have them jointly work together and hire kind of a team that can work for both. Just has a lot of cost savings, and they benefit from the learning curve, or jointly covering the cost of that learning curve, rather than having two separate people having to do this. So essentially, everybody agreed in the end that this was the way to go forward. And we, as the county being the only member agency of both of the GSAs, we developed, we released the RFPs, and we developed the contracts with both the data management system and with a local nonprofit who hired a planner and administrators to help oversee the planning and administrative services of this. So the county is overseeing those contracts. We have revenue agreements with both of the groundwater agencies to pay us for that, but the groundwater agencies are really the ones who are overseeing the activities of those contractors. So it wouldn't work in a situation where there is a lot of mistrust amongst the partners, but if you can make it work, it makes a lot of sense in these smaller basins to try to really look for innovative ways to partner and build these economies of scale. So I think that was my last slide. There's my email address there if you want to see, get in touch with me directly, and I'm happy to answer questions when the time is right.
Thank you, Sierra. Appreciate it. I just wanted to let everybody know that we definitely recognize that we're running behind schedule. We want to make sure that Aaron and Kim have adequate time to give their presentations, and so we'll make some adjustments to the overall agenda so that we'll still end on time. We want to be mindful of everybody's schedules. We know everybody's busy, but just wanted to throw that out there. So we'll adapt, but Aaron and Kim want to make sure you feel like you have plenty of time to give your presentation. So Aaron, go for it.
So yeah, I'll try and get through this as quick as I can and look forward to some of the questions. Again, my name's Aaron Fukuda. I'm the interim general manager of the Mid-Cahuilla GSA. And the other side of my brain works on the irrigation district as the general manager. So I see both sides of this issue that we're facing, from the surface water and the groundwater side. So next slide, please. So our, and I apologize, there's I left some animations in there. So go ahead and animate next, please. The Mid-Cahuilla is a 100,000 acre GSA located in the heart of the Cahuilla subbasin. We're about 100,000 acres and partnered with the two cities, the city of Tulare and the city of Visalia. Next slide, please. We're often referred to as the odd bedfellows because if you look at how we combined, we took most of the folks, the largest population centers in Tulare County, and combined them with one of the larger irrigation districts, Tulare Irrigation District. So you can see the population centers there are largely dependent upon groundwater. And then the irrigation district is historically one of the oldest irrigation districts, relied on surface water conjunctively to operate since about 1889. We have pre-1914 water rights. And we import approximately 153,000 acre feet of surface water annually. The last 10 years has been quite a challenge. And so part of that plays into our funding and our issues that we face today. But you can see that we all equally use groundwater. So we've all decided to pitch in together. And as you'll see, we try and do this equally. We did form early and quickly. One of the city managers for the city of Tulare was accustomed to groundwater issues over in the Ventura area. He recommended that we get going as soon as possible in order to get the governance out of the way and get to the technical issues that were going to be very difficult. And I think that was one of the wisest things we did, was get the governance out of the way, which included funding at the very beginning. Next slide, please. What we did do immediately after forming is decide how we're going to split the cost. And our initial approach was we equally rely on groundwater. We got into a lot of difficult discussions on how to split the cost. Do you split it based on acreage? Do you split it based on groundwater usage? Do you recognize surface water importation? Do you recognize projects? And at the end of the day, the three members decided that a 1/3 split equally seemed to be fair. We've used that for the last 5 years, and it's been working for us. For the development of our groundwater sustainability plan, we're a critically overdrafted subbasin, so our plan was submitted in January 2020. We did access early on facilitation funds to begin the process of coordinating folks together. When those funds were run out, we moved over to a Proposition 1 grant, provided $1.5 million to the Cahuilla subbasin. And there are 3 GSAs in the Cahuilla subbasin, so we received approximately $500,000 in those funds. And then the remainder of those costs were covered by our local 3 members, City of Visalia, City of Tulare, and Tulare Irrigation District. We did not need to go out for any Proposition 218 or 26 or pumping fees, as what we discovered was the 3 agencies were already working on water fees. The cities had impact fees, water impact fees to the customers, and the irrigation district it had fees within its general fund that we can move over to the GSA to cover the administration and the development of the GSP. So under the administration of the Mid-Cahuilla GSA, we continue to share equally amongst the 3 members, and our annual administrative costs fluctuate based upon the amount of work we're doing on the GSP. So for instance, this year, our annual budget administratively is probably going to be about $600,000. In the past, it's been as low as about $300,000 to $400,000, but we share those costs equally. And we do have an administrative contract now with Tulare Irrigation District does with the Mid-Cahuilla GSA. As many you're hearing are sharing staff members, we were given a contract to administer the GSA. I use those funds to staff up. Interestingly, I was given funds to staff up, and during the drought, we lost staff. So we're struggling to keep that level of employment up to where we can meet the needs of our GSA and our irrigation district. We do have plans to transition the GSA over to a standalone organization in the near future, but largely that is limited by the availability of staffing to set that all up. Next slide, please. So our outreach, as many other people had discussed, is very important. I think, and I didn't include it here, but some others reminded me to maybe mention it, was our use of an advisory committee, which has 11 members of the beneficial users in our subbasin. We have monthly meetings. Those meetings are open to the public and noticed to the public. And it's a roundtable discussion where there are appointed folks at the table where we need to cast a vote, but the public is encouraged almost to engage in that discussion. But individually, we've tackled our outreach, almost leveraged each other's access to outreach to do the best that we can. I just use an example that Visalia has access to their buses, and we've provided noticing on, they do wraps around the buses, and we've provided noticing on buses. Tulare ID has now moved into the social media realm. So we've invested in some social media outreach platforms, and I have some staff that manage that for me. And we have been very thankful for DWR's facilitation support. We used it early on, as I reported, and we are currently under a contract to have them help us through our water marketing strategy. Water markets are a new thing for the state of California, new things for SGMA and for our growers, our disadvantaged communities, and our environmental concerns. And I think we've used that facilitation to bridge the fears and turn the water marketing strategy into a hopeful product for all beneficial users. And then lastly, we do rely upon the translation services, not only of DWR, but we also have access to a local translation service that translates all of our notices. Next slide. So obviously, one of the most important things we're dealing with is implementation, or the projects. Again, as you can tell, we break our organization down into 3 members. And so each member pursues projects that are listed on our official project list. We list that on our website and in our GSP. And then we pursue grants based on a coordinated application process, so a rotational order. So TID was the first awardee, then the city of Visalia, and the city of Tulare is now next up for the next round of grants. Any cost share comes from each individual member. They'll go to their general fund or whatever funds they have available to them. However, I will have to say most of the grant programs we're accessing have provided anywhere between 75 and 85% or more of the grant dollars. And then TID and our staff, where we can, provides water management help to the projects, doing analysis. TID now has a TOTEM unit and other systems in place where we can help estimate recharge rates, soil lithography, and that sort of thing. We also have heavy equipment. As you can see in our picture here, we've invested in pan scrapers for construction of recharge basins. So the 2 current projects we're working on right now is the Okieville Recharge Basin. That's a disadvantaged community project. It's a $1.8 million project, grant funded, and 2.3 overall project cost. The irrigation district is picking up the $500,000 cost share for the benefit of the Okieville residents. We also are working on the Cameron Creek Linear Project. Cameron Creek runs through the heart of Visalia. It's a very sandy creek bed, and we're automating that creek bed in order to create it into a long linear recharge pool and flood control project. So that was a $2.2 million project. We received $2 million in grant funds, and the city of Visalia will pick up that cost difference. Next slide. So that is the project side of things. One of the more important things that's popped up in the recent drought is needing to accelerate our use of management actions, demand management, and what we're calling an emergency ordinance. So in reaction to the drought, our GSA quickly developed an emergency ordinance following what we call our water accounting framework, which is what we believe is the buckets of water that are under ownership underground. And we developed an online water dashboard where folks can track their water and we can allocate it. So currently we're under a 2.5 acre foot per acre evapotranspiration cap. And funds generated, and I'll show you how we collect the funds, go to that tracking and administration of the groundwater cap, replacement of water that is pumped out that is not within the water accounting framework. And then we're beginning to have a discussion about using those rates to move over to some of our domestic well mitigation programs that are underway. So next slide. And if you could animate it all the way to the end, I'd appreciate it. So this is our cap. You can keep animating, yeah. There's a 2.5 acre foot per acre evapotranspiration cap. And there's two categories of water users. There's the surface water users and the groundwater dependent users. As you can see on the surface water side, we're really just tracking or charging administrative fees, $10 up to the cap to administer the program. Whereas in the groundwater dependent side, you're seeing much higher costs. That's to recognize that groundwater dependent users are overdrafting per se, and I'm going to have to bring that water supply back in. There is a mitigation block on top. That's a temporary block as we get this program started. It's if either side, any party makes a mistake, everybody's willing to pay for that mistake and bring that water back in to replace that mistake. That will go away as we get into our official rules and regulations. And then there's a penalty tier above that, which is $500 per acre foot, the highest value you can charge under SGMA. But the kicker, the real penalty is a one-to-one loss in a future allocation. So if you go above into that penalty, you're going to lose a future acre foot of water supply. Next slide. We do play in the federal funding opportunities because we're a Bureau of Reclamation contractor, the Tulare Irrigation District. We have a history of using those grant funds, a lot of water smart grants for recharge basins. We did establish a tertiary treated wastewater pipeline, and the city of Visalia invested in the tertiary treatment. I think it was about a $140 million project. To Tulare Irrigation District, there was no cost to secure that water supply, just a water exchange, a 2-to-1 water exchange. So that was an 11,000 acre foot water supply that our growers picked up in 2017 and 18. And it's got I think a 25-year agreement life. We are already 25,000 acre foot in the positive balance to the city of Visalia. So it's a great program for both parties. And the Bureau is also funding our water marketing strategy, developing that water marketing strategy to match the facilitation dollars from the state. We've also accessed water use efficiency grants. Those are things like SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. We have also received one of the first awards to do a pipeline replacement to go to a more efficient on-demand and pump station program. And then we did receive some Part 3 San Joaquin River settlement funds through the Bureau of Reclamation. We've worked collaboratively with the USDA NRCS program. We received an agricultural water efficiency program, AWIP, which focuses on-farm efficiency dollars within a very specific area. And then that led to future funds for our growers through USBR funds. So if we received a Water Smart grant, the USDA would match that to the growers. So if we received $500,000 in Water Smart grants, our growers received $500,000 in EQIP funds. And then lastly, we're pursuing some FEMA grants. Not been successful, learning the ropes in this realm, hazard mitigation grants and building resilience in communities. So we're hopeful for those as a new revenue source for our SGMA compliance. So next slide, and basically that's my talk, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, we'll transition over to Kim.
All right. Well, good afternoon or morning, I guess still. And thank you. And there we go. So let's go to the next slide. I'm with Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, which was established by the California legislature in 1982 to help address seawater intrusion in southern Ventura County. Ventura County is the 10th largest ag county in the state. Much of that is within Fox Canyon, about 49,000 acres of irrigated farmland. We also contain all or a portion of 5 cities. with population of about 384,000. And although Fox Canyon is a separate governmental entity with its own board of directors, since its inception, it's contracted with County of Ventura for staffing. I'm actually a county employee. So in addition to being groundwater manager for Fox Canyon, I'm also groundwater manager for Ventura County Public Works Agency, watershed protection, and managing well permitting throughout the county and other county type groundwater functions. So next slide, please. So this shows an outline of our jurisdictional boundary, the red line, which is the extent of the Fox Canyon Aquifer. It covers majority of the Las Posas Valley Basin, the Pleasant Valley Basin, and the Oxnard Subbasin, all high priority basins. Additionally, Oxnard and Pleasant Valley are critically overdrafted. We also have a portion of the Arroyo Santa Rosa Valley Basin, which was reprioritized by DWR as very low priority. So today's comments will be focused on for those folks who are a little unsure where Ventura County is, we're sort of in the transitional Southern California Central Coast area with Los Angeles County to the east and Santa Barbara County to the west. Next slide, please. So we have mixed agricultural irrigation and municipal industrial pumping, little less than 3/4 agricultural irrigation and a little more than 1/4 M&I. Domestic pumping is sub-percentile, and our average annual extractions are about 125,000 acre feet per year. For comparison, our GSP estimated sustainable yield for those three basins is about 81,000 acre feet a year, ranging from about 67 to 95,000 in terms of uncertainty. And we expect that our sustainable yield will increase in our 5-year updates as we develop and fund projects which will help to increase the sustainable yield. Next slide, please. So Fox Canyon's unlike most GSAs that were established post-SGMA in that we have regulatory and fee authorities established under our Enabling Act. And I think I forgot to mention at the front, one of the real differences pre and post-SGMA for Fox Canyon is that in our Enabling Act, we are only authorized to operate on the demand side. We're expressly prohibited from being involved in water supply and infrastructure projects, water purchases. That has changed. So in our under our authority in the Fox Canyon Act, we have a $6 per acre foot pump charge. Our fees are all volumetric by acre foot. That's the only fee that our de minimis operators, our domestic operators pay. We've adopted a groundwater sustainability fee is what we call it under our SGMA authority. That's been adjusted several times, presently $29 an acre feet. And more recently, the board has established a legal reserve fee of $20 an acre foot under our SGMA authority for a total of $55 an acre foot. Fox Canyon has the distinction of having a basin with the first adjudication filed post-SGMA in the Las Posas Valley Basin. The phase 2 of that 3-phase trial has just concluded with phase 3 scheduled for May of next year. Adjudications have also been filed in our Oxnard and Pleasant Valley Basin, but they're in the early stage. But the special counsel expenses associated with those adjudications is significant. Other authorities that we have under our Enabling Act is the ability to charge surcharges for pumping in excess of allocation. That's divided into 3 tiers, and the lower tier is currently $1,549 an acre foot. That's set at the cost of purchase of imported water through Cayugas Municipal Water District, who's our regional wholesaler for Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. That will be going up to $1,841 an acre foot January 1st to correspond with the Cayugas rate increase. We also have the authority to charge civil penalties up to $1,000 a day for violations of our regulations. The board has established a $50 a day penalty for most violations. As $1,000 a day, it adds up to pretty much an uncollectible amount pretty quickly. It can be pretty significant even at $50 an acre foot. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, through most of the agency's existence, we've only been able to operate on the demand side. That changed with SGMA once the GSPs were adopted by our board for the 3 basins in 2019. That then gave us the authority to participate in the water supply and infra project arena. And we have, people have been talking about the grants that they've been able to utilize, and we very much appreciate the funding that we've received through DWR grant funding. We've taken advantage of the facilitation services as well as the technical support services program. And Aaron talked about USDA NRCS grant funding. We were fortunate to have a sub-grant through the Nature Conservancy for implementing AMI on agricultural wells in the Oxnard, well, throughout the basins, actually. So since we've had authority for getting involved in the water supply side of things, we've been planning for implementing fees on 2 tracks. The first track is for short-term projects. These are things like water purchases of excess state project water when it's available, for recharge for the groundwater or in-loop recharge. We're looking at potentially incentivizing temporary fouling projects. And then on a second track, the fees for the long-term capital projects, which are much more involved, a lot more engineering development that has to be done for the rate cases. Next slide, please. So we've been working on development of that first track replenishment fee for well over a year now. We hired a rate counsel and a rate consultant. They're helping us to navigate that process. Our rate counsel has advised us that if not for SGMA, we would be able to implement these fees under the less rigorous Prop 26 process, but that I think, as most folks know, SGMA specifically requires that we comply with Proposition 218 for these fees for projects. And our rate counsel advises this is kind of an awkward fit to groundwater pumping charge, since Prop 218 was conceived as a parcel basis. Of course, development of the fee requires an involved rate case and a benefit analysis. The amount of the fee cannot exceed the proportional cost of the service paid by each ratepayer. A lot of folks have talked about public engagement, and that is obviously very critical for all aspects of basin management, but even more so here, as there'll be a protest vote in any fee that we adopt. And fortunately, Fox Canyon has a very long history of active stakeholder engagement. and committee meetings, and we have a lot of folks show to our board meetings. Our board meetings have been live streamed since long before COVID, and since we've been regulating extractions for a long time, very engaged stakeholders. So our plan now is to have the first fee effective in 2023, probably October 1st for the start of the new water year. Concurrently, we are working on developing the criteria and procedures for prioritizing projects for follow-on funding. We have a lot of projects that have been identified as part of our GSPs in the 3 basins. Most of them, or at least a large number of them, proposed by other agencies. Funding mix of how we move forward with those projects will be interesting to develop, but as of right now, we're really focusing on that first track to do the short-term projects, develop funds for purchasing water, and those kinds of things. And then we'll leverage that work in order to develop the fees for the longer-term projects. And so I kind of rushed through this because I knew we were running late, and I realized I neglected to put my email on a slide. So I'll put that in the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions when we get into the question and answer session.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that, and thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate it. I think these have been great presentations. I'm glad we're able to hear so much about what you've done in your respective basins related to funding. So that obviously that did take us a little bit longer than expected, but that's not a problem at all. We had planned to have a second breakout session, but we're going to cancel that so we can get to your questions. We feel like this is a little bit like your questions are a little bit more timely versus that second breakout session. What we were planning on doing there was we were going to solicit input from all of you on the type of assistance activities or efforts that DWR could be providing in the realm of funding outside of grant funding. But we were also going to include in the survey that we're going to share after this forum some additional input on that same topic. And so now what we're just going to do is to, instead of having the breakout session, we'll just gather that information through the survey. So Amelia's going to drop that link into the chat now, just so you have it at your disposal. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we're wrapping up today, but just wanted to let you know what we're doing and why we're going to make some changes. And so what we'll do now is we're going to transition into the Q&A session. And so all of you that are participating, new forum participants, please enter any questions you may have for our panelists in the chat. We've got folks that we're going to be compiling all these questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. If you have questions that are specific to a panel member, please note that in your question in the chat function. But if you're asking a question of all the panelists, also please make a note of that too. And so while our questions are getting compiled, I did want to ask the panelists a question of my own. In listening to your presentations, it's really clear how important partnerships are for pursuing various funding opportunities. And so with that in mind, can each of you take a minute or two to share who GSA should really be considering bringing to the table when you're exploring partnerships for cost sharing, or like pooling your resources, and then what are some of the lessons you learned from that process? Why don't we go ahead and start with Kim, and just we'll go backwards in terms of from the order in which we presented. So again, who should the GSAs be considering bringing to the table when exploring partnerships for cost sharing or pooling resources, and what lessons did you learn from that process?
Well, we have a lot of partner agencies. We were established by the legislature, and they defined our board as including a county supervisor, a council person from one of the 5 cities within the county, a director from one of the small water agencies or mutuals, and an agricultural representative. So that actually brought in a lot of partners from the gate, post Sigma, and especially in terms of project implementation. You know, we have large projects that are being concerned here that may be hundreds of millions of dollars to try and address seawater intrusion, ultimately, at least in our Oxnard subbasin and Pleasant Valley Basin. And so that is a multi-agency effort. And of course, keeping our disadvantaged communities involved, as well as our environmental stakeholders, is key as well in order to engender support for those projects.
Keith, I guess I'll go next. And, you know, I think our approach to partnerships is the partnership starts with the development of what you're going to fund. And our advisory committee is the workhorse for all of that development of projects, management actions, GSP. So partnering with all of the local beneficial users. So we have a seat at the table for everybody. So that develops what you're going to do. And then to pursue the funding, I think partnerships, you know, it was important for us to make sure that at least the 3 members are at the table to, you know, because you're going to have to ask them for that cost share. But we value the partnerships out there, the federal, the state, to a certain extent, nonprofit organizations that have also come into the Kuya Subbasin and helped us on projects. You know, making sure we're keeping them up to speed and working with them. And you know, I think that a new realm we're making sure we include as our partners is legislative representatives, both at the state and federal level, so they're aware of what's happening in their constituency on behalf of the landowners. And if they could plug in and be of support, they're showing their willingness to do so. So I think it's a ground up advisory committee, making sure you have all the members at the table and your state, federal, and local representatives. Thanks.
I think I'm going to just reiterate what I said before about identifying neighboring groundwater sustainability agencies where there might be shared interests. This wouldn't be true for all types of projects. Certainly, you know, groundwater recharge projects may be focused basin specific, but so many of the other costs and you know, this could be like we did with our data management system, but also there could be opportunities for things like joint messaging when it comes to outreach. A lot of the messaging might be similar. You might have, you might be able to save money on consultants or graphic designers if you take the same messaging and then you're just tweaking it a little for your GSA or for your sub-basin within the GSA. So I think looking, knowing that the groundwater sustainability agencies are the other groups that are going to have the same goals as your agency, figuring out where there's opportunities, whether it's because of a contiguous boundary, because of being within the same county, maybe being within the same IRWM region. There's a lot of different opportunities, I think, to explore that idea further, assuming everyone can get along.
Thought a little bit about this. I wear a lot of hats and I work for Sacramento County. And I will say, I think from the county's perspective and from my board's perspective, we've tried to be a good partner to the GSAs within Sacramento County. So I think counties and local agencies can be a good partner. I think anybody in water supply and the business of water supply right now needs to be creative about partnerships. You know, in the Cosumnes Basin, we are looking at SAFECA, which is the local flood control agency, as a potential partner moving forward and looking for opportunities to do groundwater recharge using, you know, excess flood flows, if at all possible. I also see a lot of overlap between what stormwater quality is trying to do as far as infiltration and what, we might be trying to do. So I think there are some opportunities for partnership there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like this question, Keith. I'll reiterate, especially we do a lot of collaboration with our tribal community in our basin. They have a lot of resources in terms of personnel and expertise. So being able to work very closely with them and again do a co-management aspect has been very beneficial. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can continue to do. And then again with that, you open up other additional opportunities for funding and collaboration and support. I would also say that just regional efforts as well. Sierra, you mentioned, working with your surrounding groundwater basins, but for us in Lake County, we only have one priority basin. But I'll give a little shout out to Eric Catteray if he's still on the call. He recently formed a group, and we call ourselves the So Napa Lake Ocino groups. And I see some of my friends on here. And it's basically just a regional effort between Ukiah, Napa, Sonoma, and Lake County, and just pulling together and having a group that we can lean on each other and coordinate. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that group can do. And I anticipate that will be more common. And just being some sort of soundboard for one another. So I'm definitely looking at, your groups in your communities in your basin, but also a little bit outside of your basin too. Because fortunately, but unfortunately, we're all going through very similar obstacles, right? So that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. And so we haven't received any questions from the actual participants, but I do have a couple others. Just to kind of keep us going, because I think this will help with some of the discussion. So if your agency has implemented already or is considering, a funding mechanism under Proposition 218, what do you wish you knew when you started that process? That you know now. We know this is very complicated, and so it can go through a lot of different twists and turns, but for those of you that have gone down that process, I'll ask you just to go ahead and chime in, no particular order.
I just completed mine. I wish I had known just how important the outreach component was, and that was where we made the difference. We literally spent weeks of hand-holding with the growers to get them to understand what was going on. And when you do a Prop 218, it's kind of a structured process on the legal side of things. So you're going to send a notice and things. And so you have to understand when they open a notice and a ballot and a vote, and they're going to increase the taxes. What we found was 90% of the people that, open that and vote right there, vote on emotion. So, you have to have a strategy. We did it as best as we could. I would have done a better strategy on just how the material goes out, just how I communicate, and just how I engage with the growers and allow a lot more time. That's what I would recommend.
Thanks, Aaron. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Well, I'll just share. We haven't implemented ours yet. We're still in the study phase, but it's kind of funny. We might be in a little bit different shape in that a lot of our regulated pumpers came to our board and said, you need to implement a fee as soon as possible, build up some money to go out and buy water, because otherwise we're facing huge reductions in our ability to pump. And so everybody was pretty pumped up. But then once we got our rate consultants and counsel and started really putting the thing together, it put the brakes on the whole thing and kind of explain that this is a pretty involved effort and it's going to take some time. So I think adjusting our board and stakeholders' expectations on this, and again, that's an outreach thing, I guess, in a different way, has been a real lesson as well.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else want to speak to that, or I know I was specific on the 218 process, but if there's any other funding mechanism that you pursue that you think this question might be appropriate or applicable for, please feel free to chime in.
This is Sue. I don't know if this is exactly answers your question, but I wanted to I'm from Self-Help Enterprises. For those who don't know, Self-Help Enterprises works throughout the Central Valley, focusing on outreach and engagement of those who aren't already at the table. And we really strive to stand in this space between the agencies and the individuals who develop the GSPs and have to implement the GSPs, and those voices that the GSAs need to hear from, meaning domestic well users, small rural communities in particular. The outreach piece is amazingly critical, as some people knew at the beginning and others have learned. Aaron, we work a lot with Aaron. And Matt Hurley's on here from can't say it, Matt. And Matt had commented about how they got out on the outreach at the beginning and that made a difference. Some of the presenters talked about the same thing. So that when you get to the funding part, there's already some of that trust to ask people for more money and help them understand why they have to pay more money and so on. So I think it was stated that if you didn't get that kind of trust already built with that really super intentional outreach at the beginning, it's going to be harder to catch up. And I think that's a reality. I'm not even sure. I don't know that there's a solution except keep trying and stay encouraged and prioritize speaking with people. What I find challenging though for the GSAs is how do they reach the individuals? How do they reach the domestic well users? How do they reach individual people who are volunteers, just community members that are trying to do the best thing for their communities? So if anybody on the panel has any suggestions of how they effectively build those communications with the individuals, I think we would all love to hear it and benefit from it.
Thanks, Sue. I appreciate that. Marina?
I can say a little bit about that, Sue. I appreciate your comments and your expertise on that. That's one thing that we are in our Big Valley Basin, we are prioritizing. So we are planning on developing a domestic well owner's guidebook. So there's a lot of disconnect in terms of our domestic wells that we have. We have a lot of older wells with a lot of wells that don't have proper information on when they were constructed, how they were constructed. And we have been in coordination with our environmental health department. They're actually the entity that takes in the well permits. So there's a lot of confusion amongst the community on who do they go to, what are some of these resources. So we're trying to streamline that process. One thing that has been beneficial for us, again, pros and cons in working in a rural area, but relying heavily on the domestic well owners that we have active communication and engagement with. So we go out and do our monthly well monitoring, and we're a little bit outdated here in Lake County, so we get the luxury of going to these wells and dropping sounders in the wells. We've had a few instances where sounders have gotten stuck, but that's besides the point. But we're able to make contact with these well owners, right? And they're able to see a face to the name. So if they have any questions or concerns, they know that, they know the time frame we're coming in, we give them heads up. They can call us and ask us these questions. And if we need to funnel them over to environmental health or other resources, I know there's some funding opportunities available that we have available on our website and that we carry with us. They know that who they can call and talk to. And then they can get the word out there as well. So again, just really leveraging those voices, those key voices that you have in your community, building relationships with them and engaging with them in a constant manner has been very beneficial for us. And we're planning on continuing to utilize that.
I can add a little. Yeah, that's okay. From what we did when we first we're developing our groundwater sustainability agencies, was we actually included seats on our board for private well owners. So in Santa Cruz Mid-County, there are 3 private well owner representatives who sit on the GSA board, and in Santa Margarita there are 2. And they've helped us. They've helped us organize community meetings focused just to private well owners and talked about outreach. I think some of our most successful outreach has been, we did a series of educational sessions that were on a Saturday morning, and those were very well received. other really successful outreach things that we do is to go to places where people already are and tables. So we've been going to farmers markets. We've been going to, there was like a old car show up pretty deep into the mountains. And we tabled there and we had, it was hot and we had water. And so people came over to the table because we had water with cucumbers and lemons in it, and it was delicious. And people kept coming back to get the water. And when they would come here, we would talk to them. So those have been some of our most successful outreach ventures, which is not to say that we haven't done a lot more, but it's interesting where the traction is. I will say that one thing that we did not utilize well early in the process in one of the basins, we had a meeting planned and we didn't post it on Nextdoor. And what that did was create an opportunity for someone else to post about the meeting on Nextdoor and kind of shape the narrative in a way that was really negative. But we did get a lot of people at that meeting. We had about 130 people in a standing room only situation. So while that wasn't how we would have liked to go about getting people at the meeting, sometimes a little bit of scare tactics from someone else, at least it got people's attention.
Real quick, I heard you say, I think 3 things is number 1, have something that people are attracted to when you do go to an event. And number 2, get ahead of the messaging.
Yeah.
So the messaging that you want delivered is delivered. And number 3, well, when you had people come, is going where people are and talking about what matters to them, like their domestic wells, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some key, so there's some, and Marina kind of, no, who was talking earlier? I'm sorry, I missed your name, or you were a panelist, but there were some key things that I think all of us really could benefit from of what to include when we do this outreach so that we do get traction, so that it is effective, because too many times people say, I've done all this and nobody came. We hold these meetings and 2 people came. Holding public meetings doesn't get people engaged. So what really works? I think we need some help, and I think DWR would help all of us if you get out some of these tools of really good, effective engagement strategies.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Sierra and Marina for chiming in. And kind of, I know we're starting to run a little bit, short on time. And again, I want to be mindful of everybody's schedules. I know we're all busy. And Sue, to your point, and I think this is similar to a question that Teresa posed in the chat about DWR doing sort of direct advertising or reaching out directly to the SGMA stakeholders. And one of the things that we have done as a department is we've created a number of different tools and resources that GSAs can use, and so those are on our assistance page, and we can provide a link to that in the chat. But just want to keep in mind that SGMA is about local control, and we want to really create opportunities and provide assistance to the GSAs so they can then reach out to their interested parties, beneficial users within their basins. And so it is really meant to be for the local entities to be reaching out to their own constituents. And so we'll continue to provide resources on the front to be able to support the GSAs, but we really want to have it have that engagement happen at the local level. And so I think that hopefully answers maybe your question, Sue and Teresa. It looks like we have thanks Christy for providing the link to that. And then I think Judy, I do see you have your hand raised. I think we are going to, this may be the last question or comment, and then we got to transition to close out.
I was just going to say, and I'm typing in the chat, that DWR did a great job of providing educational materials for SGMA and GSP development, and Christy just posted some other communication and engagement resources. Often a clearinghouse of information is so helpful. Like I heard that Lake County is doing this domestic well users guide. The domestic wells issue is really important, and there's not a lot of off-the-shelf materials about it. And it would just be great if somewhere, there was a website that and it would be hard to curate, but that resources and different strategies could be posted so that it makes it easier for people with outreach to do outreach.
No, thanks, Judy. Appreciate that. And we're to continue to try and bolster the resources that we have available. Our assistance and engagement page online is really where we try and keep a repository. We call it a toolkit of items that can be helpful, to the locals. So, well, again, just want to thank our panelists for their presentations and being available for answering questions, and thanks to those of you for asking questions. We do want to start wrapping up here, just in the interest of time. I want to share a few next step items with you. First being, as I mentioned earlier, the survey, the links in the chat that Amelia provided. We put the survey together because we want these events to be relevant and beneficial to you. And so we need your input, for future topics and any comments you have about meeting format or anything along those lines. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that the survey is going to also give you an opportunity to expand upon some of the things that we've talked about today, provide some additional thoughts about what type of assistance that DWR can be providing, in the areas of funding. And what we have a couple other, post-event materials that we're going to be sharing. The first being, and we mentioned this in the chat earlier, that there's going to be a recording of the panel presentation and the Q&A session. And then we're also going to be sharing a directory, of the forum participants. If you elected to be, to have your name and information shared in that directory, there was an opt-out component. So we'll notify you through email, like through our SGMPS listserv. If you're not subscribed to that, please definitely recommend doing that. We can drop the link to that in the chat. And we expect that those are probably going to be available by the end of November. We're also working on a funding option guidance document to capture some of the funding lessons learned, from the GSAs, like we've heard today, along with some other things to be considering before you would be pursuing specific, funding, mechanisms. And so this is going to be posted on our website, on our assistance and engagement page, but we are going to notify all of you via our SGMA newsletter. And so we are planning on releasing this in early 2023. Again, if you haven't subscribed to our listserv, you also wouldn't be getting our SGMA newsletter. So we definitely encourage you to do that. And then, we also want to make sure that, you join us for our spring 2023 GSA forum. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, we want to make this a regular thing. We want to have one in the spring and one in the fall. And so we're going to be sharing a save the date, for that spring event in early 2023. We'll advertise that through our newsletter as well. And then, lastly, if you have questions about this forum, please, contact us through our SGMPS. This is a wrong email address. It's sgmps@water.gov. Next slide, please. So lastly, just want to thank you all again for attending today's GSA forum. We're just so excited to be able to get this venue back up and running again, especially after a long hiatus from COVID. We really appreciate you participating and engaging, in our breakout session. Sorry we couldn't have the second one, but I hope we'll be able to gather some really good information from the survey. Again, a huge thank you to our forum panelists, Marina, Carrie, Sierra, Aaron, and Kim. Thank you so much for taking the time to develop your presentations and your willingness to share the lessons learned. Thank you to Fresh Air Media for providing the Zoom platform, and to Stantec for helping us organize and run this event. Thanks to the DWR facilitators and the recorders for leading the breakout sessions. And then lastly, I want to thank Amelia Wisniewski from DWR for planning, organizing, and leading this event. Definitely couldn't have pulled it off without her. And so, we're 1 minute under. Glad we were able to rally and end this on time. Just again, so excited to have you all here. Appreciate your participation. Look forward to seeing you next time. So take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.